Welcome to Mouthwashing, a surreal horror game developed by indie studio Wrong Organ, who is also behind How Fish Are Made, which is a very normal game indeed. It's a family-friendly adventure about making friends, hype parties, and proper dental hygiene. If you overlook the death, depravity, gore, mutilation, essay, and many other heavy topics throughout the game that YouTube will bend me over their lap and spank my tushy for discussing, that allows oiled-up men to spread their raw booty hole without consequence. Though I digress. Mouthwashing is an immersive, linear, narrative-driven experience with the main focus being on atmosphere and storytelling rather than gameplay. It's a walking sim with detective elements, which isn't for everyone and normally wouldn't be my forte, but the way the story is presented here, the charming art style, and the fabulous sound design just grab me around the neck and balls. The story is fed to you in fragments and subtle metaphors, hinting at its direction but also intentionally misleading and gaslighting the player, keeping that mind racing and plot unpredictable. This is especially effective if you're fucking stupid like me. This is all elevated by the memorable, fleshed out characters and the stories that feel real and can be sympathized with. It isn't some in-your-face Lovecraftian cosmic horror as one would expect with the whole space setting, but a grim, real, and depressing tale that isn't for the faint of heart. Well, with the spoiler-free review out of the way, I invite you to grab a scrumptious snack and beverage and spill some blood for the Emperor. To tell this tale, we must start from the very beginning. This tale begins in a distant future, where any exciting adventure would, the cockpit of a space delivery freighter. The name of our vessel, the Tulpa, which is halfway through a year-long voyage to deliver unspecified cargo to an unspecified location. Oh, what's this? Make a manual correction 1.4 degrees left to avoid impact with an unknown mass? Well, whoever is steering this spaceboat made a decision any good captain would, and steered directly into the unknown mass. YOLO, I guess. Seems the autopilot has engaged and is trying to correct course. This is probably fine. Oh goodness, crash imminent. Well, I'm not taking responsibility for this debacle. After some laps up and down the halls that are suffering heavy damage and covered with the mascot of the company we work for, Polly, suddenly a contorted version of Big P blocks the way forward, then TPs behind the player as the screen fades to white, presumably due to the collusion with the asteroid. Chapter 2 begins, 2 months after the crash, with the crew deliberating on whether the contents of the cargo being transported may be useful in their survival. Swansea, the jaded, sour, thick mechanic in charge of maintenance and repair, is against this idea, as doing so may dock their already meager pay. Anya, the Tulpa's reserved and quiet nurse responsible for the crew's physical and psychological care. Daisuke, my precious goofy little boy, is a naive and optimistic intern under Swansea's supervision. We play as Jimmy Mouthwashing, the Tulpa's navigator and co-pilot, who all agree gaining access to the cargo hold is a priority. Anya reminds the crew the cargo door has an alternate access code that will be revealed using a device only the captain has access to. Jimmy asserts himself as captain. We gain control of him and are tasked with locating the code scanner. Here we get to explore the ship and learn a little bit about the characters and their dynamic with Jimmy. As you explore, you'll notice large gatherings of a white material covering the ship's interior. It's insulation foam, which automatically discharged on impact and sealed any compromised parts of the Tulpa immediately, saving everyone's lives but blocking access to certain segments of the ship. Standing guard outside utility, Swansea tells Jimmy the room is filled with this very foam, and he is working on safely removing his equipment from the foam, but insists it's too dangerous for anyone else to enter. The way he speaks to us suggests he has little respect for Jimmy as a leader and a person. So where is the captain? Why is he not doing captain things? Well, if we make our way to the medical bay, lying on a hospital bed is Captain Curly. Moreover, what's left of him. Immobile and unable to communicate. He was inside the cockpit on the moment of impact. He was severely mutilated beyond recognition, being torn apart by shrapnel, losing an eye, both hands and feet, scorched by the explosion, charring his flesh and almost all of his features. The foam likely stuck to him, needing to be removed, tearing away heaps of meat, leaving subcutaneous flesh and muscle exposed to infection. How this dude is alive is unbelievable. Bro's injuries are fucking catastrophic. The pain he would be in. He looks like a piece of beef jerky. Anya is tending to Curly, and understandably struggles to care for him, especially with administrating the painkillers. Too nauseous to do so, she asks Jimmy for help, where he belittles her for being incompetent as a nurse. It's uncomfortable and tension seems high here. I'd argue the fact that she kept Curly from dying with all those injuries proves the very opposite. Jimmy force feeds Curly the medication, with a pretty gross combination of sounds. causing Anya to rush out of the room. After, we find Anya kneeled over, unable to handle Curly's pained cries, and contemplating why he would crash the ship. Holding on to hope, she states, "Our worst moments don't make us monsters." This will be important later. Making our way to the cockpit, we find the scanner and get an idea of the immense destruction that occurred from the crash. The systems, of course, all inoperable, the ship drifting through the infinite void without direction. I can think only one thing: Curly should have parried that shit. Arriving at the entrance to the cargo bay, the crew is waiting for us to open the door. Using the revealed code, the door opens to a large room filled with boxes and blue balls. We time travel to 7 days before the crash, playing as Curly, where Anya is performing psych evaluations on the crew members. Down to her last eval, that being Jimmy, Anya is seemingly too nervous to do so, probably because bro is clopping it to MLP.
You're a fucking animal fucker, okay?
No! Curly offers to take it off her hands, much to her relief, implying Jimmy makes her very uncomfortable for some reason. Before we speak to Jimmy, we're needed in utility, where Die Doofus is trapped in the insulation foam. Swansea is just talking mad shit. He was trying to repair a very dangerous ventilation shaft connecting to the medical bay. Leaving utility and Jesus! Curly informs Jimbo he will perform his evaluation instead of Anya. We head to the cockpit for the eval. Well, this is a strange looking cockpit. This is a bizarro sequence. Hallucinations that foreshadow events to come and add further nuance and symbolism to the story. Curly completes Jimmy's eval and off the record asks how he's holding up. Jimmy states he likes the control of being co-pilot, but complains that all the praise Curly gets for his good leadership is annoying. Curly confides in Jimmy, expressing his fear that this is it for him, a good old freighter captain, not inherently unhappy with his job, but contemplating whether this was the path he wished to go down. Jimmy compares Curly's feelings to those of reaching the very top rung of the ladder, but maybe you were on the wrong ladder to begin with. These two are close, BFF material, but Jimmy is noticeably envious of Curly's position. We are interrupted by a message from corporate and, how the fuck? Back as Jimmy, in a dim cargo hold, the phrase "take responsibility" blinks rapidly, an important motive that will make sense later. At the end of the room sits this raggedy-ass TV displaying various videos, my favorite being the last channel showing an advert for Dragon Breath mouthwashing. Not sponsored, by the way. We then jump to the present, to Jimmy looking at a full box of that very mouthwash that was on the advert. The entire cargo hold being packed with an unfathomable amount of it. No vital supplies, mouthwash. Anya realizes the sugar content is too high for medical use as a disinfectant, where Swansea notices it contains 14% ethanol and gets to work on getting absolutely shit-faced, breaking his 15 years of sobriety. With dwindling supplies, the gravity of their situation sets in, the beginning of the end. 6 days before the crash, Curly must break the news that he received from corporate that everyone is being laid off after this trip. In the lounge, the crew has a surprise birthday party waiting for Curly. They're allowed only one per trip, and Curly, being the captain, is the only one who has the clearance to make a cake for himself. Everyone is in high spirits until Curly breaks the news. He admits he was meant to wait until the mission was further on, but thought it unfair to them. Swansea acts unsurprised. Anya panics about her financial future, while Jimmy immediately becomes antagonistic, blaming Curly for something he had no control over, belittling the crew and projecting his insecurities onto everyone. We begin to see the kind of man Jimmy is, an envious narcissist who needs to be validated and only cares about himself. Curly cuts the cake. 3 months after the crash, Jimmy is awoken by Curly's pained groans. He goes to find Anya to see if Curly had been given his medicine. He finds her distraught and conversing with Swansea in the cockpit, growing increasingly paranoid and frustrated. Jimmy heads back to Curly to give him the medicine, where he expresses his fear of what's being said and how the crew views him. Specifically, what would she do? Implying there is something Jimmy is paranoid about coming to light, where he out of anger beats Curly before giving him his painkillers. Another out-of-reality event. Again, the text "take responsibility" appears. Curly is seated at the table. We talk with him about enjoying the subpar things in life, like cake and walking. We go to find a knife for cutting the cake. We locate the axe in the cockpit. On the monitors appear multiple piercing eyes glaring at Jimmy, watching him, symbolizing his increasing paranoia. Now we must feast. Hey, what happened to my cake? 4 months since the crash, Jimmy is checking on the crew. Outside the cargo hold, Daisuke is plastered on mouthwash. He laments on the situation, having no prospects or skills, feeling aimless. We've all been there. Jimmy says there's still hope. We take the bottle and leave him be. In the lounge, we find Anya considering drinking the mouthwash herself. She also informs Jimmy that additional painkillers are located in the hallway that isn't too deep into the foam. Deciding it's worth the risk of being ejected like an imposter, Jimmy goes to retrieve the fire axe from Swansea, who is bussing it down freak style. He gives up the axe by swinging it into the large monitor. Remember, foreshadowing. We clear the foam and retrieve the medical supplies from the locker. Anya congratulates Jimmy in an over-the-top way, likely to make her upcoming request of asking Jim to give Curly his meds easier. Jimmy, however, completely melts down, blaming Anya for feeling sick and that he's the only one trying to fix everything, listing off everything he's done in the past 5 months, which is fuck all. An average of 1 task a month? Okay, bro. Jimmy gives Curly his meds and tells him he now understands the pressure of being captain. 6 hours before judgment, an enraged Swansea is trying to access the cockpit Jimmy has taken refuge in. He barricades the door just as the glass shatters. Things are going to get a lot worse. 2 days before the crash, Anya and Curly are having a conversation in front of the nighttime display where she points out a single dead pixel. Curly is unable to notice it, preferring to look at the bigger picture. Anya then asks a concerning question. Why would Pony Express put a lock on the med bay but not the bedrooms? Okay, let's put 2 and 2 together here. Anya is the only woman on the ship, is very uncomfortable around Jimmy. Jimmy is worried about what she's saying, and she is now asking about the locks. Something horrific has happened. Curly responds ironically, it's for safety reasons, not realizing that Anya has basically spelled it out for him, showing his inability to see anything but the big picture. 5 months after the crash, Daisuke frantically yells for Jimmy's help as Anya is trapped in the medical bay. Anya reveals she sealed the door at her own volition, saying she should have done what Jimmy told her sooner. Jimmy demands that she open the door. Anya states I'll take care of it, planning something drastic. Jimmy convinces Daisuke he must use the dangerous ventilation shaft in utility to access the medbay. The problem is, Swansea remains guarding the door. Jimmy tells him they must drug him with a spiked cocktail. Daisuke is fearful of stuffing up again, and Jimmy reminds him they need to save Curly. 8 hours till judgment. Daisuke lay writhing in agony, seemingly a result of his attempt to access the medbay. Swansea tells Jimmy to use the disinfectant he found earlier. Jimmy admits he used it in a cocktail and immediately blames Swansea. We now must find a substitute. Entering medical, half of the screen is jarringly distorted, where Curly would normally be. Jimmy then heads to the cargo hold to find some mouthwash and finds a tombstone at the entrance with a hibiscus flower, the same one on Daisuke's shirt. Jimmy enters the cargo hold into a warped version of it. He follows a path of blood into a guilt-driven hallucination sequence where the player must avoid a horrific version of Polly and retrieve the mouthwash needed for Daisuke's wounds. This segment was fantastic. This is the first real horror segment, and it went hard. We retrieve the mouthwash and he returns to Daisuke, where we return to before his accident. Swansea still refusing them access to utility. He chugs the spiked beverage and drops like a sack of potatoes. Taking his keys, oh shit! We enter utility to find it barely foamed up, contrary to what Swansea told us, with all but one cryostasis pod destroyed. Jimmy speculates Swansea was keeping it for himself, which is wrong. Back to the task at hand. We see the utility vent, which I'm no medical professional, but looks fucking dangerous. Jimmy still urges Daisuke to climb in, however. Upon making his way a distance inside, he screams in agony. Moments later, he makes it into the medbay, and upon entering states, Anya, what did you do? Blue-balled again. 1 day before the crash, back as Curly, we are tasked with finding the gun. Searching the ship, we enter the cockpit to find a distraught Anya in the midst of a breakdown, who has taken the gun case and hidden it. Curly thinks the reason for her actions is the loss of her job, where she cuts him off and reveals she's pregnant with Jimmy's child. Curly is taken aback and asks who the father is. Anya states, I told you. Curly then immediately knows who this is, and to me, indicating he had known about the situation to some extent. While Curly is a better person than Jimmy, he prioritized keeping the peace rather than protecting Anya from him, refusing to do what was right, believing that this piece of arse is redeemable. He had not only completely failed her, but enabled Jimmy to get away with it. 6 hours before judgment, Daisuke's condition is rapidly declining. Jimmy is too ignorant to understand the dire situation. Swansea is not, and reaches for the axe, telling him he's a good kid who just tried his best, that he could have learnt a whole lot from. He then plunges the axe into Daisuke's head, mercifully putting an end to his suffering. But in true Jimmy fashion, he yells at Swansea for not letting him try to fix it. Swansea doesn't humour him, and Jimmy chooses now to accuse Swansea of his plan to save the pod for himself. Swansea reveals Anya told him about the SA, and tells Jimmy to go and take the pod, insultingly saying he's earned it. Jimmy heads off to find the gun. We're entering the medbay. We see Anya slumped over, having OD'd on painkillers. The blurred segment from before symbolizing Jimmy's refusal to acknowledge what he did to her. The gun case is located under Curly's cot, where upon opening it, Curly bursts into mad laughter. Suddenly, Swansea charges Jimmy with the axe. 0 days before the crash, Anya had told Jimmy about the pregnancy. He isn't too happy with the situation, you know, the one he caused. More worried about what will happen once they get back. He pins it on Curly for not having everything under control, basically blaming him for why he Anya. This made me want to tear his head off Filtramite style, but Curly just comforts him, telling him they will get through it. Jimmy offers an alternative: crash the ship, everyone dies, and it will all be remembered as a tragedy. He then tells Curly he'll take care of it, and heads for the cockpit. Curly and his lush locks don't even argue, until alarms begin to blare. Curly makes a dash for the cockpit. Jimmy, outside, remains silent, having doomed everyone. Curly attempts to redirect the ship, but it's too late, as the Tulpa impacts the asteroid, causing Curly's subsequent mutilation. Jimmy fully intended to take himself and the others out. When this failed, he seized the opportunity to take charge and manipulate the truth as he does best. 1 hour before Judgment, Jimmy has completely lost it at this point. He moves Curly from his cot and lays him on the lounge table, where the crew looks very not alive. They cheer him on as he further mutilates Curly and serves them all a piece of his severed leg. Surrounded by the consequences of his ignorance, Jimmy still cannot take responsibility for what he's done. Again, blaming Curly for everything, forgiving him on behalf of everyone. Okay, so the following sequences are Jimmy having a full psychotic breakdown. I think it makes more sense to explain the symbolism of what we experience rather than just summarize and explain later. The first being in the medical vent Daisuke met his end in because of Jimmy's manipulation. Strewn around are all his belongings. The player must walk backwards through the vent. Turning around or looking at Daisuke's things for too long causes the screen to distort. Another example of Jimmy failing to take responsibility. Jimmy confronts Swansea in a graveyard, where upon shooting him 3 times, we get a glimpse into his final moments, with a beautiful monologue. He reflects on his actions, admitting that despite his efforts to turn his life around, get sober, settle down and start a family, he was happiest when the only worry was an empty bottle. Even so, he did the right thing. Despite his flaws and harsh attitude, Swansea is a good man, who truly cares for those around him, which is evident by his guilt for not being able to protect Daisuke, likely saving the final stasis pod for him. Swansea faced the music and took responsibility. He made sure Jimmy understood the piece of shit he was, a pathetic man with a hero complex, who was too delusional to see the selfish being he is. Jimmy again vomits he's going to fix everything, and Swansea hits him with the coldest fuck you I've ever seen, as Jimmy shoots him in the head. It's interesting to note that not once do we see Anya in these hallucinations. Instead, we see a horrific mass with unborn horse fetuses inside, representing the unborn child, with no regard for Anya, as seen in the hallway full of IDs. Hers are all obscured. Jimmy also believes that saving Curly will act as penance for his crimes. In his conversation with Curly, Jimmy dilutes himself into hearing everything he wants to so he can paint himself as the hero. He selfishly keeps Curly alive, assuming what others want for his gain. Any guilt Jimmy feels is just some pathetic excuse to avoid responsibility. This all culminates with a final hallucination. Polly, the company mascot, stands in judgment of Jimmy, lambasting his stupid and selfish actions. Jimmy, still delusional, rejects this and rambles about saving Curly and accepting he fucked up and that he's sorry. Jimmy starts quoting Anya before being interrupted by Polly, telling him he has yet to show any concern for the one he wronged most of all, Anya. Not once had he apologized or even acknowledged her. This tragedy is all a result of Jimmy's cowardice in taking responsibility for his actions, and any chance he had at redemption is now long gone. Back to reality. Jimmy has consumed his serving of Curly's leg. He carries Curly from the lounge table into utility and places him in the last cryostasis pod. Our view shifts to Curly as the pod seals shut. Jimmy tells him it's okay, you're going to survive. I fixed it. He then walks out of view and turns the gun on himself. A single gunshot rings out as the pod freezes Curly for the next 20 years. Then, credits roll. Damn. Jimmy's intentions until the end were purely selfish. The only reason he saved Curly was so he could die a hero in his own eyes. All he did, however, was doom Curly to an even worse fate. He will likely wake up in 20 years and slowly starve to death alone and in agony. Jimmy avoided all responsibility and ultimately got exactly what he wanted in the end. Jimmy is obviously the main villain, but Curly was an enabler. Even if unintentionally, he didn't take Jimmy's assault of Anya seriously enough, being more concerned with keeping the peace than doing what is right. Do I think he deserved his fate? Hell no. But in a sick twist of irony, he became helpless and was at the mercy of Jimmy and his abuse, just as Anya was. And that does it. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. There are definitely things I missed and videos going over Mouthwash's themes better than my small brain ever could, but I wanted to talk about this little game a bit. It isn't the greatest story ever written, but I really enjoyed it. So consider subscribing for more dank slop like this. I've been your Lord Maxarus, and until next time.